the Romans speaking, Paul talking about the baptism, the value and the importance of baptism. But over here you have a beautiful baptismal font. And as Presbyterian, we baptize with a dabble of water because it's a symbolic. It represents something that God has already done in our life. We also baptize infants because we believe in the sovereignty of God, that God alone saves. And so before we have any ability to do anything about our own salvation, we recognize that it is God who saves. Before we can prove ourselves by memorizing the Apostles' Creed and John 3:16, we recognize that God has saved us not because we prove ourselves worthy to God, but because of God's love for us. I've had the opportunity at times in my ministry to baptize by immersion. It was a powerful experience for me. They requested it. Being Presbyterian, we had to bring a horse trough into the church and fill it up with warm water. What was powerful for me that I was not expecting is lowering this person, this young adult, into the water so their head went underwater. And then I had to lift them up out of that water again. It was a powerful experience for me because I recognized they were fully reliant on me to pull them back up. In a sense, I was a symbol of God pulling them back up out of those waters. It's easy to say the symbolism of our Presbyterian baptismal waters is that just a cleansing. There's nothing dangerous. The baby may think it's rather dangerous, but there's really nothing dangerous about dabbling a little bit of water. There's something very dangerous about lowering somebody down into the water and pulling them up. When you think about it, that fits. When God first decided to kind of erase creation and start over again, what power did God use to erase creation? After he had all those animals up onto the boat, and they sang the pontoon song, he used water. Water. When the chaotic waters of creation, what did God do? God subdued those dangerous, creative waters. And those are the same waters that are the very 98% of who we are as a physical human being. You will die from thirst faster than you will die of starvation. Water is a very powerful symbol, and baptism even more so. I want to share with you the story of my life of how I went through a baptism in my life. I was dabbled as a baby at John Calvin Presbyterian Church. Don't get much more Presbyterian than that. But I went through an experience 13 years ago. I was a young pastor down in Allen, Texas, had my whole future in front of me. In fact, a future that I worked hard on. A future that I took pride on because I worked so hard. I studied hard in college, and because of my good grades, I made it into graduate school. And because of my hard work in graduate school and seminary, I did well. And I went out and I got a church. Went and worked at a large church, did my time as the youth pastor on staff, and got to see how a church operated. So then I took another rung up the ladder of church leadership, and I had my own church down in Allen, Texas. A young preacher, up-and-coming preacher. And I was proud of my hard work. I was proud of my ministry. I was proud of what I had achieved. And in all that wonderfulness, of course, I talked about God placing me there. Suddenly one day, I was walking around and not feeling too good, and so I stopped by my doctor, a friend of mine, and I said, boy, he said, Mark, I'm telling you, you eat too many hamburgers. That's your problem. Come back on a Big Mac, you'll feel better. It's just for fun. And maybe because he needed some money, he put me under his x-ray machine. This is some kind of from the Civil War. Got out the results. think some little critters chiseled it on the stone. That's how old this machine was. And he says, Mark, you have an aneurysm in your heart. We're going to need you right up to St. Luke's. They put me right up to St. Luke's Hospital, put me in one of these. This isn't one of these. I didn't even stay in the waiting room. They took me right to an emergency room, started plugging me up with all these tubes, and I could tell this was a surgical room, and I didn't know what was going on with my life. But I was a strong guy. I said, I can take this. Tell me what I need to do. Cut, do whatever you need to do. I got a pulpit to preach it on Sunday, folks. And then several hours later, they took all the tubes out. The doctor came back in and he said, Mark, we've made an appointment for you to see an oncologist. And I said, what does an oncologist do for a heart? Because that's a cancer doctor. I didn't know what to make of that. Cancer, wait. I know people fighting cancer, they get really sick. I know people with cancer, they die. I didn't want either of them. I didn't work hard in my life, actually sacrificing time with my family and myself so that I could just die of cancer now. It wasn't in my plan. I didn't work on it. Well, I learned the lesson real quickly. If you make an appointment with a doctor and you can't see that doctor for 2 weeks or 4 weeks, that's good news. When they make an appointment for you for 12 hours later, that's bad news. When they want you to see a doctor that quick. So I went and saw the oncologist. He told me about the different kinds of cancers. I'm like, just, let's not waste our time. Just cut it out and let me get on with my life. Well, we got to do some tests. Once again, those tests weren't 2 weeks away. Those tests were that very day. They sent me over to the hospital for some tests. And I was laying on the table there. And a young technician was doing whatever they were doing for a biopsy. And she looked at me and said, "Boy, you're so young to have cancer." That was the first time I realized I'm a cancer patient. A few days later, I went in for some heart work because the cancer had damaged my heart. And the doctor said, "Well, we're going to go into surgery and have a little look." Like, you don't do surgery for a little look-see, doctor. I know better than this. He says, "We just need to see what's going on." I said, "No," and I ran into the bathroom because I wanted to find a window to crawl out of and just escape everything. Hospitals, perhaps intentionally, they don't put windows in the bathroom. They do locks. And so I was in there for a good half hour saying, "No, this can't be happening to me. I didn't plan my future this way. I don't want this to happen." And like everything else in my life, if I put my head to something, I usually was able to get my way. So a half hour later, the doctor had the maintenance staff unlock the door, and he came in with his nurse and he says, "Got a syringe full of curds for you, Mark." Popped that in me. I was like, I got a fading away, and I haven't signed the paper. If your wife has. I woke up a few weeks later as ICU. And there, I was no longer marked down. Young pastor, climbing the ladder. I was marked down, non-Hodgkin lymphoma, large cell B, late stage. I lost who I was. That's what cancer does. Take away who you imagine yourself being. In a sense, at that very moment, I was lowered down into that baptismal font. My head underwater, scared to death. And I say that quite a bit. I thought my death was in front of me. I was in an amazing amount of pain. My thought before of healthcare was always fix it and then I'll get back to normal. I recognized this was going to be a long battle. This wasn't going to be something that I was back to normal afterwards. And I was mad. I was sorry for myself. I had a loving church. They brought by casseroles, not for me, because we had a team of who wanted to eat, but my family. They were taking care of them. And they would come by and with their best efforts say, "Mark, we're so sorry. Mark, we're praying for you. Mark, we love you." And my response would be, "Let me tell you how awful I am. Let me tell you how miserable life is. But guess what? After that, people didn't come to visit me much. Who wants to visit somebody when their response is, I hate life? This isn't supposed to happen to me. And sure enough, life became only more painful. Life became only more bleak. My first results back, the tumor wasn't shrinking. I was down in the baptismal waters, real good. Real good. I had a lot of good friends. One of them was a camp care volunteer who was a survivor himself. And every time he called me, every week predictably, he would always say, Mark, tell me some good news. And I would come out with the same misery, anger, and frustration I would with him. I don't have any good news. I'm just sitting here waiting to die. Why is God doing this? You know, I'd say, Mark, I'm going to tell you some good things that happened to me. And he would share his. Finally, one day, I just got tired of him. I thought, well, I'll just show him. And go, Mark, tell me some good news. I don't have any good news. Oh, come on, Mark. You got to have some good news. I had a good poop today. Because that's great. Isn't that cleansing feeling? Kind of releasing, you know? It's great, isn't it? It's like, hey, I guess you're right. You know? Mark, the circumstances in your life are miserable. You didn't ask for this. You didn't earn this. I don't believe God gave this to you. But even with these circumstances in your life, the grace of God is still here. It might come in the form of a refreshing bowel movement. It might come in recognizing that when people come to your door, what people are really saying is God hasn't forgotten about you. God still loves you. And they still love you and care about you. That's good news. They're not there to remind you that in their help you're miserable. They're there to remind you that in your misery, you are still a blessed child of God. And I realized that if I was still a blessed child of God, that if God had woken me up that day, and if God had given me life that day, God would give me purpose and joy and grace in living in that day. And so instead of always looking and only seeing the misery of the circumstances in my life, I began to see the grace in my life despite the circumstances. I saw a wife who was caring for me, who was caring for my 2-year-old daughter, who was working almost 2 jobs in order to pay the bills. I saw her. That's that love of grace. I don't know what it is. I saw my 2-year-old daughter who still saw me as her dad, the one who was always going to be there. I looked out the windows and I saw the beauty of God's creation and realized I was a part of that creation. And I began to realize at that point, now God was lifting me up out of those baptismal waters. And I was opening my eyes once again and seeing my life not as the mere circumstances, but instead I was seeing my life within the grace of God. And I came to realize that with the grace of God, no matter what the circumstances may be, I can still wake up and say, this is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it, right along with the song. Thank goodness, after a year and a half, I beat it. You know, it wasn't me. Beating that cancer was nothing like me earning my education and starting to climb the professional role. Beating cancer wasn't my own doing. I did my part. My doctors did my part. My family did their part. My friends did their part. My church did their part. And certainly our loving God did his part. I survived cancer not because of what I did. I survived cancer, I believe, really just because of the grace of God. Never because I'm so honored. I got close to getting up to heaven. God said, I don't want him. And so still today, when God wakes me up in the morning, I say, this is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. And I can look around and I can see colleagues in ministry who have bigger pulpits, who have bigger budgets, who are more admired. Those are just the servants of ministry. I have the privilege of sharing the good news of God with you this morning. That's good enough. I have the privilege of talking to people one-on-one who are battling cancer themselves, and myself being the one, come on, tell me the good news. Give me some kind of break so I can show you all the grace in your life. God puts a shelter over my head, gives me more food than I probably should eat. I got a good life. Oh, yeah, I would like to drive a late model car. That would be nice instead of taking mine into the shop all the time. Oh, yeah, I would, there's a lot of things I wish could be different in my life. But you know what? God woke me up today. God gave me life today. As a cancer survivor, I don't know what tomorrow holds in store for me. And I've learned to come to peace with that. Because I know today's a one. Today's a good day. Today I can go out and hopefully share that blessing with a few other people. That's the grace of God. That's the blessing of God.